hope and courage from the existence of you. There is no other diocese where people have fought back so consistently. So many people have bewailed what's going on, but felt that they are just powerless. They're just little people, and the diocese is so important, and there's nothing they can do. But as Neil said, there is. And I hope as many of you will come to our conference in Bristol on the 20th of April at noon, which is about campaigning, but is going to have a lot of positive stuff as well. There's nothing better than getting together with other people and feeling, as Neil said, that you're not alone. And you have such an example to show to other dioceses, so I do hope you can come. So I'm not going to talk to you about finance and how resources could be used differently, even though that's important. We know that Tina is not true. There is always an alternative. There are always different plans. But the Admiral and others are the experts on finance, and I am not. Instead, I'm going to talk about how we might gain confidence in a vision of the parish that will empower people. Without that trust in who we are, what we do, and the power of the gospel, we'll get nowhere. We need to remember that the parish is a tough old institution, dating from the 2nd century. It's actually older than the diocese. There were bishops, but the idea of a diocese is later. Bishops were just the chief shepherd in a place, but diocese is a term that comes from the later Roman Empire. So just remember that. Parishes are older. And the reason that they've lasted is that they are flexible, that's true, but they're also part of what's basic about being human. We're physical beings, and we need to relate to other physical beings. And we also have a kind of internal compass inside us that allows us to get our bearings. We all need somewhere, not just somewhere that has borders, but somewhere that we kind of orient ourselves like a compass. And only parochially situated mission and ministry works and speaks to that common humanity. It has to be small enough to be able to make those relationships and have that kind of physical sense of belonging. So I'm going to list a few of the reasons we need the parish from my first sally against central Anglican policy, which denigrated the parish as long ago as 2004 in mission-shaped churches. This is why I complained to be a founder, because I could see trouble ahead in 2004 when they started talking about inherited church and said it had nothing to do with mission. Mission was all about fresh expressions, and fresh expressions was to be kept hermetically sealed away from parishes, instead of being the natural kind of outworking of a decent living parish. And that separation is what we were against in that book. And in those days, Giles Fraser, the journalist, thought we were all wrong and the parish had had its day. But then he retracted on Unheard and said, Alison, you were right all along, which was music to my ears. I don't often hear that. So the kind of reasons in that book, I argued for the importance of the parish for 4 reasons, and I summarise all this in the new book. The first is because, as I said, a parish is local. A parish church grants the place where it is an identity. It tells it it's a real community. In places stripped of shops, pubs and post offices, like some of our ex-mining towns and villages in Nottinghamshire, the church is all that's left. You know, when Betfred shuts its doors, you know you've really had it. Remove the church and you tell those people they do not matter. And of course they all say, oh, no, we don't really want to close churches. Well, Paula Venables of the Post Office did a report for the Archbishop's Council where a number of people told her they really wanted to close 1,000 and were planning on this. So, but also in Leicester Diocese, they've got something they call the doom loop, which we found on the internet. It's very good just Googling things. You can find all sorts of stuff out there. And here they were. This was the equivalent of your deanery implementation teams. And they were saying, well, we're afraid that, if we have fewer services in churches, people will give less money. And if they get less money, we'll have to close churches. It's the doom loop. And a Churches Against Poverty research project in the Manchester area discovered that churches in more deprived areas were much more likely, twice as likely, or even more to close than those in affluent, leafy suburbs. It's not just pretty village churches, it's deprived inner city social housing churches that are also just as vulnerable. Secondly, we need sacred places. Keep a church open and people will find their way there, for we all need somewhere to become more serious, as the poet Philip Larkin put it. A church speaks of other values from the market. It links us to our past, and it's our duty to preserve its memories for future generations. So it doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the future. Ordinary people gave their labour, their money to build these places, and it's not for us to close them down. Lovely to see plenty of room here at the front. So the church building is itself missional. I remember when I was a curate, we didn't open our church every day, I'm ashamed to say, but when we did, people just came in, and it wasn't on the main road, it wasn't even in the middle of the village, it was way on the outskirts, but they came, and they will come to ours if we keep them open. Because a church tells us that God is there, and the whole parish is holy. It doesn't just separate the holy bit from the secular bit, it's a kind of marker that the whole parish is holy ground. And it points to that. Very literally, I've been staying at the King's Arms in Paul, and you come up the hill and there's that wonderful tower with the little tower on top. And it just says, this is different. This is holy. And it speaks of God's stability. This is why the building matters. It says, God is here. God is not going away. The church is here. The church is not going away. The church is here for you, whoever you are. Because thirdly, we need inclusive places. The parish church, unlike the gathered resource church, which rarely offers funerals, baptisms, or weddings to local people, is there for everyone. We are a mixed body, not a gathered community. And the vicar is traditionally there for everyone and a sign of that inclusivity. At times of crisis, the church is a resort, as has been true in the floods in Tewkesbury, where literally the abbey is built on slightly higher ground, so they all take refuge there. And in the Grenfell Tower disaster in London, the church already was at the centre of community, and it already had good relationships with the mosque and the Methodist Church, and they all worked together. And they felt that this was because this was what parishes did. And I was with the Penzance and Penley clergy last night and could see how involved in the community they are. They're involved with children, they're involved with the homeless, they're involved in everything that's going on in the community. And that is the DNA of parish life. And as I said, they're doing the kind of work which, on the way, things can only be done by pioneers, but can easily be done by ordinary clergy if they're given the manageable jobs that enable them time to do it. Fourthly, we need mediating structures, kind of middling ones, which move between the individual and larger institutions like the state or the diocese. Because people in the modern world are really atomized and isolated, and all mediating institutions, from the family to political parties, pubs, clubs, has suffered strong decline. Though you wouldn't think that if you saw the Mousel male voice choir last night. I have to tell you, there seemed to be about 50 of them in the pub where I was staying. But generally it is true that, you know, people struggle to keep pubs going around the country, to keep clubs going, to keep trade unions going. It's not just the church. That's again important to remember. When they always blame the congregation, blame the parish church for what's going wrong. It's a larger national and international problem. When you have a building, though, you can gather other groups and support them. And in your vulnerability, be supported by them. The parish church is a gathering place which should make a virtue of our weakness to unite with other people. It's a kind of opportunity. Even it may seem a problem that numbers are going down. We need to think, how can we think about this positively? The gospel tells us we are the body of Christ, knitted together, not a collection of self-enclosed individuals. And I think part of the protest against reorganisation is because deep down we know this, and that we need human-scale ministry. I listened to the first oversight minister in the Leicester reorganisation on YouTube the other day, being interviewed by the bishop. He has 23 parishes and 33 churches to oversee in the Laund Mission Minster area. He seemed a very nice, sincere man, but he said ruefully he never felt at home in the parishes because he was always a guest. He had to fight against the temptation to make the church next to his house into his parish. Priests and people alike need manageable local parishes to mediate between the self and the conglomerate. Now, our whole church in a time of secularisation needs renewal, but it won't come from pretending that the parish as a mode of life and liturgical community and sacramental worship and the prayer book and all these things are the problem rather than part of the solution. Even for those who stay in the many holiday cottages that hollow out Cornish villages, they need it too when they're here. One northern bishop who values the parish told us he is planning for growth, whereas to do massive pastoral reorganisation is to plan for decline. It is not a mode of renewal. It's a corporate mode of managing decline. And we all know where that leads to with Wilko and places. Wilko spent far too much money on the centre and let all the Wilko stores just die. Perhaps you don't have them in your part of the world, but in the East Midlands they're a big thing. They're like a kind of Woolworths. So where should we begin? We need to find ways to reach out to younger people and families, but we should begin with thankfulness for the faithful we have and all that they do. No matter if they are elderly, they are God's gift to us. They should be loved, valued, nourished in the faith and served. There will be ministry they can do which others cannot, such as praying, for example. And I'm not making an obvious point. A church that prays into its community and holds every part in intercession is thinking about that community, is outwardly focused, and will begin to grow in the connectivity of its common life and be ready to welcome others. And a local priest told me yesterday that in fact, even when you're serving the elderly and looking after them pastorally and possibly giving a lunch club or something like that, they have families who are responsible for them and will recognise the value of the church in actually helping their elderly relations. You are already connecting with younger generations, though you do not realise it. So we shouldn't undervalue the work that we do with the people that we have. So we've got to stop thinking that they are baggage, is one word I have heard used by the moderator of the Church of Scotland, but also by Anglican priests about their congregations. And I've got a lot to say about this in the book, how this comes about historically. I date it back to the 1960s, and a kind of the way that religionless Christianity in Bonhoeffer was interpreted. We need to pray for priests. There are wonderful committed young people training, but I know for a fact from talking to young priests and ordinands that they're quite scared for their future. Will they have jobs 20 years on? Will they be able to exercise the kind of traditional ministry to which most of them are called? Save the Parish did a survey on this among ordinands and found that the vast majority do not want to be oversight ministers. What a surprise. And yet, even when I was training, and Emma Thompson put this in her article, which we put on the Save the Parish mailing last week, that when I was training, which is now about 20 years ago, we were all made to read Stephen Croft's Ministry in 3 Dimensions, which more or less makes you think that you're going to be someone who sits there administrating, and the lay people are going to do all the work. That seemed to be, I wasn't convinced then. I mean, they said to us, you know, you mustn't be shepherds because that's paternalistic. And if I'd had my wits about me, I should have said, well, are we supposed to be sheepdogs then? You know, what are we supposed to be? But of course, you had the answer. I think you got it in one of your documents that somewhere on the way, somebody said we don't need shepherds, we need farm managers. But anyway, we need priests. There is a problem with vocations, and no wonder. Insecurity and sheer lack of valuing priestly ministry, as well as impossible jobs that give priests nervous breakdowns, are key factors. So much of the material coming out from dioceses makes no distinction between lay and priestly ministry. One document, leaked from the Archbishop's Council, named quite a number of high-up people as saying that priesthood was old-fashioned. We need a revaluing of our threefold orders of ministry. And we need good quality theological training, as somebody was reminding me earlier this afternoon. It's no good having priests if they don't know what a parish is, if they don't know what the Eucharist is, because there are priests coming out who do not know these things. I was at a meeting with somebody from Holy Trinity Brompton, and I told him this, and he said, oh, I'm sure we want to teach those things. So I said, I will volunteer to come and do some sessions for you. Well, I haven't heard back. Now, we need a real valuing of the lay vocation. Some will indeed be called to be readers, and many to visit the sick or help at food banks. But lay people have a real calling of their own. You know, they may be plumbers, they may be journalists. This is their religious calling, and we need to honour this and not use them as a source of cheap labour, as I sometimes feel underlies the supposed valuing of lay ministry. There is no substitute for the cure of souls of a parish priest, someone who is an outsider as well as an insider. It's a different kind of ministry. And we're supposed to believe in it. We need to be confident in the many benefits of traditional and regular worship. I found in my research that priests who have manageable jobs, believe in what they're doing, and do traditional things well can make their congregations grow in many places. Perhaps not stratospherically, we are in really, really tough times, but they can have sustainable parishes that are outward facing and happy and growing. It's possible. But we need to be confident in the benefits of regular worship. Many studies show it keeps you healthier mentally and physically. It connects us to God and each other. It builds community, it is creative and speaks to our deepest needs. It makes a social contribution. Just think of the cost of living crisis and how parish churches up and down the land offer warm spaces, food pantries, debt advice, toddler groups, lunch clubs, and just people to listen. The social benefit of churches is estimated by the National Churches Trust. This is not just Anglicans, it's free churches as well. But together, 55 billion a year. If those churches are not there in the local places, the state will have to pick up the tab. And this is before we think about spiritual benefit. You would not be here if you did not love our Lord and his church. And we believe too that sacramental worship is at the heart of what we do. And along with the devaluing of the threefold ministry has come the devaluing of worship that follows a pattern, that follows the lectionary. Eucharistic worship. Most parish churches are Eucharistic because since the parish and people movement of the 1950s, nearly all churches took on the Eucharist. It was actually a way of being missional then, because it was saying, we're not just sort of people, we're not just pew fodder, we're people who participate actively. And this is why we need the Eucharist, because we offer the Eucharist together. It's not just the priest doing it, we all do it. We are all part of the action. And a lot of pastoral reorganisation is trying to tell us that the Eucharist doesn't matter either. And that is a fantasy. We will not grow without the Eucharist. So you need to fight for local priestly, pastoral and sacramental ministry. Save the Parish Cornwall have simple, manageable proposals that are wholly positive for how, with a number of priests that even the bishop says he thinks he can produce, you could have clusters of 3 parishes which priests could manage, where people could know them. It wouldn't cost any more money than what you've got. For the benefit of the country of Cornwall, of your own town, city or village, and the care of your own soul, you need to fight for parish ministry. If the parish did not exist, we would just have to set about inventing it. Thank you. I'll shut up there.